it's not just making it visible, but the bodies that survive in the archive are often the bodies that are remembered by the archive. And the bodies that are invisible or silenced or missing will remain missing. You play Mahjong? You understand what I mean?
I know what you mean.
That's why I wanted to ask you about the research you're on at the moment at Berkeley. Because it's already been a year since you...
Yeah, but I'm still doing coursework.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a 6-year course. So the first 2 years are coursework, and it's mainly just getting to know the institution. Yeah. And
okay.
Also, like, who is available to work with me, what their interests are.
Okay.
But it's going to be like transnational, queer, I guess, Singaporean, regional, historical archives.
But have you felt like has it developed somewhat from...
There are two strands that I potentially can do now.
Yeah.
And I'm still in my first year, so I'm like straddling and thinking, should I go into this or still go into that? The current new strand that I'm sort of invested in is rubber and plantation.
No.
Which a lot of artists have done. But yeah. I'm not doing it to produce work, but I'm more like stringing this body of work together and stitching it with, I guess, a strand of theory called eco-Marxism, and thinking about the landscape of Singapore, which many people have already written about, but also through a queer lens.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you thinking, I'm trying to, like, it's this fascination with rubber because the production around rubber shaped the landscape in such a way that is in conjunction with the certain...
No, but rubber is
production
also
of certain...
like a material history of, a queer materialist history of rubber in Singapore.
Okay.
And the material of rubber itself as a fetish object, both as a commodity and sex.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it actually is from that queer object show, you know, it's like the materials that were taken out from that show. And
were rubber objects?
One of them was like a silicone rubber, like ish thing.
Right. Okay. Okay.
That is like you know, like rubber as prophylactic.
Yeah.
Also rubber condoms that are supposed to be like protection and second skin, and rubber as prosthetic. Yeah. So there's so much metaphorical richness in rubber and within the Singaporean context. And if I do the biographical stories, because my mom was a rubber tapper.
Oh, okay.
My grandma was also a rubber tapper.
Here
in Singapore, like in Hong Kong, which is a village near Jurong West.
Did you ever play with it as a kid?
No, I never really played with the latex.
Okay.
Yeah. But those, like when I was young, I would remember my mom telling stories of how she had to wake up and like go into the rubber plantation. Sure. And initially she was the one that was handling like the bowl, like the little assistant. And after that she might upgraded and she did like the cutting, which is the herringbone thing.
Yeah.
So I've always been obsessed with that memory, and also like the sticky sap.
Yeah, yeah.
And the viscous liquid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then one of the things is also that the reason why Ray Langenbar came to Singapore and the region was because he got a fascination with rubber. So his earliest works were all latex and rubber work.
Right.
Like painting on canvases of latex.
Okay.
And he came to the region because he got some research partnership with Dunlop or one of the rubber companies. So that was his introduction to Singapore and Malaysia. Yeah.
Huh.
So there's also something there that can be unpacked. And you know, many different artists have worked with rubber, the tree, or rubber as material.
Yeah.
So there's also something about stringing and connecting that body of work, which I don't think has been done yet.
We had a studio resident called Felix Camelson who worked on was really interested in the history of the plantation economy with the rubber as well.
Yeah.
But then rubber also has an interesting history with the development of the telegram lines.
I didn't know
Right.
that.
Yeah, because I think part of the information that's communicated, that's what needs to be communicated, is revolves around the plantation economy, but also that a lot of how they decide how to insulate those lines actually again depends on the quality of the rubber produced. Yeah, when they lay into the ocean.
So infrastructurally and network, which is something also quite, the media network and infrastructure is also quite significant, like in terms of the theory that's being produced around it. Kenneth, Rayan, so that is another aspect.
Did something spark it off, like the whole rubber thing? Like was it a class or something, like, or a book?
It was a class I was taking that was reading of Capital from cover to cover, volume 1 only.
Okay.
Volume 1 only. Yeah. So
Very good already.
yeah, I couldn't make it. It's the toughest class. So this time was actually good during the pandemic. Like this, I mean, I'm trying to like put a positive spin on things, but having to come back here and physically spend time with my family, extended period of time with my grandma. Yeah.
But are you able to access? Were there archives that you wanted to? Or
No,
things
I
that you
haven't
wanted
really
to
done
look at?
archival research yet.
That now that you're here, I mean, and also you're here for at least another
Half a
5
year.
months. Yeah. Are there kind of materials that you, or projects that you kind of maybe could take up again? Like, it doesn't sound like Catamite is going to. It's like a standalone project that you did. Then you entered thesis research.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's something about that.
I
also
think
continue.
somewhat tangentially related to this queer oral history thing is the Fort Road thing that I'm doing.
Yeah. Did that come about just because you were walking a lot?
No.
You've always wanted to do something like that, and then
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been really hard. That's the thing I've
because
realized.
you why did you end in 2000?
Because I wanted to collect a certain generation of
Okay.
memories.
Okay.
And I knew that it was going to be difficult
Sure.
to get gay men who are in their 50s or 60s,
Yeah.
70s.
Yeah. And that generation might be even less on the internet than the ones
Yeah.
in the 40s or 30s. Yeah.
And also excited because you go on Blowing Wind and it's like so many
Right.
lurid and exciting accounts. Then when you go and message them, nobody like the crickets.
Yeah.
Which is also this weird tension, right? On one hand, then the urgency and the importance of this oral history project is even more significant.
Yep.
Because you need to capture these stories. But at the same time, then you're dealing with material that people are uncomfortable relinquishing or relaying or reliving as a moment of trauma. Then how do you negotiate with that also? Yeah. So
What are you trying to build an archive?
upload
I mean for like this
Fort
Fort Road
Road?
thing, yeah. Like, are
so
you
the
getting these
initial
stories? so that-
initial plan is that I really wanted to go back to film. Because film was my original practice a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I did a couple of films. And after Chicago, I moved into performance. But because of the pandemic, then live performance somewhat truncated in terms of opportunities. So there's also this opportunity to like turn and pivot back towards the film medium
Okay.
and documentary.
Oh, okay.
So I really wanted to speak to people and
Who will then appear on,
no.
or just even like,
It's like autopsy, so it's like voiceover
right.
matched with images.
Okay,
And
okay.
I'm imagining that it'll be like Fort Road now, and this anachronism of what they're saying and this image of like construction or Gardens by the Bay East or the Founders Memorial
Right.
that is being built, and hoardings and construction and LTA and MCE, the tunnel,
Have you? Yeah. Sorry.
No,
There's
so that was the original vision,
Yeah.
just to match the voices of like lurid experiences, exciting Eden, 90s Singapore with something that is present. Yeah. Working with Wan Ping, so Wan Ping's shooting.
And already shooting?
No,
Okay.
we really wanted to collect enough accounts.
Okay.
We did a recce where he did some photos, and we are doing our short list based on those photos also. But we really wanted to collect accounts first, so we know exactly what to collect and from where.
Because your Catamite project still kind of you feel like it's, because when I looked at it and participated in it, and at the time when you talk about it, it seems like it was like one moment in,
I don't know,
maybe a longer development, but now it feels like maybe you feel like gao liao.
I don't know. I'm a very lost part. You know, it's like this project seems to like grow and grow and just like add more parts to it, that it's not entirely out of the picture, but it doesn't really fit the thesis. It really just depends on which strand I want to tease out for my thesis lah.
Sure.
And what of these projects do I want to bring into it. If I want to work on the original premise for the thesis is illiberal pragmatism as a gesture of resistance in Singapore. Yeah. So that's like the PhD spiel in the proposal. So it will involve looking at Josef, looking at Catamite, looking at other forms of pragmatic queer resistance, maybe a little bit of Pink Dot. Yeah. And just like teasing them out. And one chapter each.
I guess there are projects like I kind of situate Catamites alongside the Queer Objects project, as well as the Radicate, in that there's a kind of investigation of an archive by itself producing or supplementing that archive. You know.
Yeah.
So there's a logic of working alongside that kind of recording.
And even Fort Road is a revisitation of Radicate. Because there's always this sense,
just with the proximity of the sites, right?
Yeah, but it's also this sense that I've always worked with the performance itself, but the origin and the root of what inspired the performance was 12 Men and Trap.
At Katong Park.
At Tanjong Ru, basically the article itself, which features so heavily in the performance, but nobody actually really dissects or deals or negotiates with that particular strand of history. And that's an area that needs to be covered. So you see it's like basically can all assemble into one. And also like if I want to talk about reclamation of land and construction of nature, and then we can go into the eco-Marxism.
Right. I mean, part of my fascination with this area of working was whether or not the aggregation of the material is partly by methodology, or is it by like site, where it's like the proximity of these sites close to each other. So therefore so that's kind of what I mean. Or is it like certain bodies appear again and again, certain kinds of bodies appear again.
And certain figures, I would say certain figures keep recurring. And
what are these figures?
I think this idea of the queer male body, nude male queer body as threat to national security. I think that's something that resurfaces again and again. Paddy, when he strips on stage and he exposes his body, which has been ravaged by the virus. That's also another moment where you really hear the audience gasp. It's like when you see a queer naked body on stage, and it's that part fascination and paranoia and anxiety and castration complex that is kind of woven into a very, I would say, particular Singaporean kind of reaction to this figure that I'm interested in teasing out and trying to understand basically.
A part of the thing that drew me to want to see Catamite and also think about the Fort Road project was whether or not you felt like your contribution was a way to rethink what it means to approach this idea of the record or the
No, but the frustrating thing, and that's
Oh.
always in all
No,
archival
this-
engagements,
right,
with
which is this thing
Catherine-
about how to make it visible, right?
No, but it's not just making it visible, but the bodies that survive in the archive are often the bodies that are remembered by the archive. And the bodies that are invisible or silenced or missing will remain missing. And that was the thing that I was grappling with the most when I came away from Katamai, is that ultimately I'm still silencing Sudin, but I don't have the authority to put words into his mouth and to give him a voice. But I'm perpetuating that violence of silencing by opening up this archival material and reenacting it. Yeah. And it takes somebody else to do it. But I, as a Chinese male, privileged majority, figure, cannot be the one to give voice to Sudin.
Also, you in a number of ways you've worked in which that in some ways the script that gets produced was often produced by other people.
Yeah, but
Right, there are like moments in Katamite where you encourage folks to speak through the objects, for example, and among other kinds of examples.
Yeah,
like
but
the queer objects is another
it's
one.
still so scripted in a way, and it's feedback I received from Katamai that the person who was voicing Sudin, or I offered, it's like anybody would want to take his role and voice, and he speaks in Malay, and often it will be a Malay speaker within the audience that steps up and performs Sudin's role. And there was one night when somebody who spoke that role said that he was really frustrated and angry in a way, because he wanted Sudin to say so much more, but the script calls for him to just answer in monosyllabic words, and there was this tension and frustration that he felt. And I didn't know how to resolve that, because that is what is transcribed from newspaper archives.
Sure.
And I could accept it as that and perpetuate that violence on another brown body in this present moment.
Sure. Yeah. But also, I mean, did you ever feel like the mode of kind of like basically the methodologies of polyphony are not something that you feel is something that you would want to do, like where you basically allow for speculation, you allow for the kind of almost like the playwright's prerogative, right?
Yeah.
To allow certain things to be written as dialogue,
But the thing is that
even if they are not the kind of documentary truth.
Yeah, but I've choreographed a situation for this kind of multiplicity to occur and surface, but it's still a choreographed kind of frame that is ultimately trapping, and it's a very heavy-handed kind of structuring.
Right, because I felt like when you asked me, for example, to read, like I felt like the agency wasn't. I felt the control really was that because you really ask us to read it word for word. You ask us very clearly not to depart from the text.
Yeah.
So I felt like the only agency is in the other performative elements, with what I can do with my hands or my shoulders or the wig you make me wear. So I feel like so that's got me thinking about the ways in which if that kind of fidelity to the text was always necessary for you, or whether or not even textually you would allow for that kind of agency or polyphony.
That's something I'm grappling with. Like what you mentioned, if there wasn't that fidelity of the text, then the other performative possibilities would not arise. Because if I give the person the opportunity to just speculate, just perform whatever you would want in response to the text, then naturally it will all fall back to textual kind of vocal, signifiers.
Also, as a actor who's worked in theatre, you've actually been in environments where the text changes as rehearsal goes along. Right? So that's why I was curious about whether or not you through that experience might
But
consider other approaches to the text.
no performance studies, you're always like performance is twice behavior. So in order for that potential to arise, then we have to keep doing it. So you have to keep performing that. So we have to perform the trial twice. In a performance that is already laborious and lengthy enough.
Okay.
Yeah, but ideally such situations and possibilities will arise
Okay.
where we are able to perhaps even workshop like legislative theatre, you see, like workshop a different ending for the trial.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of doing a mahjong performance.
Cool.
Yeah. See, I'm everywhere, right?
What,
it's like
what
all
is
over
it
the
about
place. No, because during the pandemic, then my family and I started playing mahjong more and more.
Also, you can play already.
I didn't know.
Oh, okay, because I really don't know how to play.
No, but the reason why I didn't know it also has a backstory. So my dad has always been a mahjong player, and he's always been really quite addicted. When I was growing up, the only memories that I associate with him is like him playing mahjong like overnight, or we are studying in the room. Yeah, and he will always have his gang of friends, and my mom was always very against us learning it, which is the reason why I never learned how to play mahjong.
Okay.
But now he's like 70 plus and he stopped playing already, and he's like Parkinson's. So it's during circuit breaker when I'm back here, the only kind of social activity that we can do as a family is to play mahjong. So I picked it up and I learned it, and we've been almost playing every single day. And we don't play like a lot. We play like 2 wins, so it's like 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Then when I asked around, it isn't a unique phenomenon that's happening in my family. It's like almost every other family they're playing mahjong. Yeah, so it's like mahjong as a strategy of spending time together and socializing during the pandemic.
Yeah.
In response or as a coping mechanism. Yeah, so that was the genesis. Then I'm working with Melinda, who recently had to return from New York.
Oh, the dancer.
She's
Who's now
ASMR.
doing the. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that. Okay, I know which Melissa you're talking about. Yeah.
Melinda.
Melinda.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I know which Melinda.
So we've always wanted to work together.
The Whisper Lodge.
Yeah, Whisper Lodge. So we've always wanted to work together, and we wanted to do like an intimate kind of performance piece. So the premise of the piece is basically we go to people's house and we play mahjong with them. So we bring the table and we bring the mahjong set. Then it's 2 of us. Then we will like have 2 other people because social distancing restrictions are 5 people max. Then we will do like a 4-hour performance, which is playing mahjong. And for me, I'm fascinated in it's gonna sound so poser, but it's the aftermaths basically, like coming fresh from there and going into mahjong. You really think about like what would be a Marxist reading of mahjong? What would it sound like?
Right.
And basically, like there are certain games in Chinese tradition that are always ethically elevated and held on high regard, like Wei Qi and Chinese chess is like cultivated pastimes. And there's the more decadent like Su, which includes mahjong. And part of the Su-ness is because of this element of luck. And Wei Qi and chess is like strategy and skill.
Right. Yeah.
But the counterpoint I'd like to provide is that, Wei Qi and chess is basically a narrative of Singaporean meritocracy. And mahjong is closer in approximation to actually reflecting the societal inequalities. The very first hand, you don't play, so you don't know. But basically, the moment you get the tiles and you open up the tiles, everybody is already unequal already.
But I mean, it's also a useful metaphor in that because Singapore wanted to refract its meritocracy through this idea of a very Chinese Confucianism anyway, right? So it really borrowed metaphors, logics, pedagogies from that kind of
cultivated scholar,
your scholar, ruler kind of elite,
and the more Hokkien dialect, the more like I guess the baser kind of activities and habits. For a very long time before they built the casinos, they considered as like things that they would like to eradicate from society or ills. So there's this very moralistic controlling of mahjong, and part of it is maybe talking about the philosophy of mahjong as a way of reconfiguring our relationship to it.
Yeah.
So for me, it was really represented. It's like Monopoly is a critique of the capitalist system, and Mahjong is a critique of this particular kind of Asian value system in Singapore. Yeah. So for me, that's academically where the interest
it would also be fun to see if chance actually becomes more of how you work with a Mahjong piece, like as in how you actually produce a work about Mahjong, because you determine a lot in your work.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you
I prescribe.
Yeah. So it'll be kind of funny if you over prescribe a Mahjong work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. So it's about strategy and skill, and ultimately somebody who is more experienced probably would have an upper hand in the game. So it's basically everybody who works according to But basically, the moment we start out, the tables are that basically it's unequal already.
Sure.
It's predetermined in a way. It's destiny. It's like whether you're born with a silver spoon or not.
Do you think you like if you can go away again, like apart from school, like if it's possible to travel again, would you want to go anywhere else? Would you want to go anywhere else? Would you want to like go London, for example?
I'm really trying to move away from going to Europe.
How come? Because of COVID or because of something else?
Not because of COVID. I think it's just that I've been tracking like where I've been consistently going. I keep tracing back my own kind of circles and loops. And there were a lot of, because I was staying at International House in Berkeley, and there were a lot of international students from Africa. And I realized and I learned how little I actually know about that continent. So Africa and China has been like a place I've never been. So I would want, now that traveling is actually becoming so scarce and so impossible, and we don't know when we're going to travel again and how frequent, then I think it's like I would like to explore those spaces more in Latin America than retracing and revisiting places that I've been.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've not been to South America yet. I've been and it's kind of strange considering how long I've been in the US.
Right? Have you seen the MTU CCA show?
Not Line?
Yeah.
I've seen parts of it.
Okay.
Right.
I've been like kind of addicted to it. I went back twice and I watched the movie like twice.
I really like the Cold War film.
Yeah, the Cold War film is fantastic. Naeem film
is really good.
And then I went online and I watched like his seminar on documenter with Paul.
Yes.
Oh my god. Yeah. He's so eloquent. And there's so much tension in that room also. It's so fascinating. Yeah, but he's my new idol. I would like to make works like that. Like that kind of rigor with the archive and return to the film medium. Yeah. But I'm also really fascinated with that because it features Rajaratnam so heavily as a structuring device. He like appears in the beginning and appears at the end. And I realized I've never heard Rajaratnam speak before. And that was like one of the first few times that I remember actually hearing him speak. And I wondered what about all these other figures? Like it's so dominant that LKY figure that all these other figures get sidelined.
Yeah.
And
Danabalan.
Yeah, and to be able to stand in front of a room of world leaders that include Fidel Castro and Gaddafi and say the things that he said. I'm not sure whether you caught that quote. It's like 2 sentences.
No, I can't remember.
Basically, he's asking everybody in the room to like interrogate what sort of infrastructure we are actually basing our communication on. Who makes the phone on your table? Who makes the mic on your table? How can you cut the imperial powers out of the conversation if you are so reliant on your infrastructure? He said that, in a room full of third world leaders in 1973. And to have the balls to say that and to be a contrarian voice in that kind of global setting takes something. Yeah. Like brash and insolence, but also real, kind of gung-ho spirit.
why I brought that up.
No, but he really and that exhibition is in line with like this focus on global south and other countries beyond the orientation to Europe,
Sure.
or the retreading of the desire to return to Europe or to especially London.